10 Facts about life during the Great Depression. 1. The middle class was hit pretty hard. We tend to associate the Depression with poor farmers, but even people with steady employment had to tighten their belts. Upper middle class income dropped by as much as 40%. Many people kept kitchen gardens and patched their clothes. The Depression-era motto was, use it up, wear it out, make do or do without. 2. Fashions changed radically. A new look in women's fashion emerged in the 1930s. Designers had to create more affordable fashions. Depression-era dresses favored longer hemlines and slim waistlines. Lower heels and less makeup became the norm. Accessories were especially important. They created the impression of a new look without having to buy a new dress. 3. Potlucks proliferated. Casseroles and one-pot meals were very popular. Favorite foods of the era included chili, macaroni and cheese, soups, and chipped beef on toast. Potlucks were often organized by churches. It was both a way to share food and provide cheap socializing. 4. It was the golden age of board games and mini-golf. In the 1930s, movies became less affordable to many Americans. More than one-third of American movie theaters closed between 1929 and 1934. Board games and card games became popular instead. Both Scrabble and Monopoly were introduced during the Depression. Mini-golf was another favorite pastime. More than 30,000 miniature golf links sprang up across the country. 5. Radio was the most popular form of entertainment. Nearly 40% of families owned a radio. Comedy programs, radio plays, and music were very popular. Popular radio shows included Amos and Andy, The Lone Ranger, Buck Rogers, and The Shadow. 6. More women found employment. Before the 1930s, women were expected to be homemakers, but the Depression made many families seek a new source of income. Despite crushing unemployment, the number of married women in the workforce grew. Women mostly took clerical or service industry positions. They worked as secretaries, teachers, telephone operators, and nurses. Employers often preferred women because they could be paid less. 7. Many people became traveling hobos. Many couples couldn't afford a divorce, but men often abandoned their families. This was sometimes called a poor man's divorce. More than 2 million men and women became traveling hobos. Many of these were teenagers who left home in search of work. They would ride the rails, illegally hopping on freight trains. It was a dangerous way to travel, often resulting in accidents. 8. Herbert Hoover was blamed for the Depression. In March 1930, President Hoover declared that the U.S. had passed the worst. This statement would come back to haunt him. Homeless people lived in shantytowns called Hoovervilles. Food served in soup kitchens was commonly referred to as Hoover stew. Newspapers used as blankets were known as Hoover blankets. There were also Hoover hogs and Hoover wagons. 9. Many criminals achieved mythical status. Bonnie and Clyde were the most famous outlaws. Their 2-year bank robbing spree captivated the nation. In Chicago, gangster Al Capone actually opened a soup kitchen. Bank robber Pretty Boy Floyd reportedly burned mortgage notes. All these criminals were often viewed as Robin Hood-type folk heroes. Violent crime spiked in the early 1930s but began to decline after 1934. 10. Farms were often sold at penny auctions. This term arose during the foreclosure of Depression-era farms. Neighbors would gather at an auction to forcibly sell someone's farm. They bid pennies, nickels, and dimes. Anyone who attempted to make a higher bid was threatened. Sometimes dangling nooses were used at the auction scene for intimidation. The farm's original owner would have no choice but to sell.